Human nature is pretty complicated. For our academic convenience, let's classify the human nature into biological and behavioral nature. The first is biological. So, at the very basic level, the human being is nothing but, after all, an organism. But he is not all biology, he is also a behavioral species. So, first, let's look at the biological nature and then we'll go into the behavioral aspects. Well, number one, the most loudest and obvious biological aspect of the human species is the erect posture and bipedalism. We are standing on two legs, and we are standing on two legs habitually. We are not occasionally standing on two legs like other animals. So, erect posture and bipedalism. How did this evolve? What happened because of it? What are the causes and consequences? All that we'll see later when I discuss evolution. One thing for sure happened because we stood on two legs. Our forelimbs, the front limbs, they became free. Earlier, like any other animal, we were quadrupedal. We used to walk on four legs, F-O-U-R. And one fine morning, our ancestors decided that they want to stand on two legs and remain that way. When they did so, for the reasons we will see later, these two limbs which were hitherto used for locomotion have suddenly become free. When they became free, we started using these front limbs no more for locomotion, but we decided to use them for manipulation. In the process of developing the ability to manipulate objects, we developed two very unique aspects of the human biology: prehensility and opposability. The first one, we developed an ability to move our fingers. This ability to use all the fingers in unison is called prehensility. We can make use of our hand the way we want. Second is, look at your leg. All the 5 digits or the toes are in the same plane. Whereas in your hand, if all these 4 fingers are in one plane, in one axis, your thumb is in an opposite plane. And not only that, but you developed an ability to move this thumb independently of the other 4 fingers. You don't have an ability to control the movement of your toes like the way you have an ability to control the movement of your fingers. So one ability is the ability to move your fingers. This is called the prehensility. The second is an ability to move your thumb independent of the other fingers, and this is called the opposability. Prehensility and opposability. The prehensility has given us what is called as a power grip. I am able to hold the object very firmly like this. And opposability has given me a grip which is called as a precision grip. This power grip and precision grip are the ones that created the material culture around us. We ended up becoming what? The tool makers and the tool users. So this is what has happened when we stood on the two legs. Standing on the two legs was not an independent, isolated behavior. It started a chain reaction, finally culminating in the opposable thumb and the prehensile hand. And the third important aspect of human biology, a generalized adaptation to environment. That we haven't committed to any habitat on this earth. We are not like fish which can only live in water. We are not like birds which can only fly. We are not like the polar bears which can only live in the tundra. But we have never committed ourselves in evolution like other species. And that has also enabled us to create our own environment. We create our own ecosystem and we live in it. But it's not biology alone which is responsible for that. It is because of a culture we are able to live in every habitat. We are allowing culture to create our own habitats called the cities, for example, is only because our adaptation biologically is non-committal. Because we develop the technology to help us survive. Electricity, clothing, shelter, we shift our food habits and we also play around with the nature of crops we grow. All that is culture, but that is not possible if our biology doesn't permit us. Another important fourth one is the complex brain. Let me give you a very simple example of what I mean by a complex brain. We have 5 senses: the sight, the sound, the smell, the touch, and the taste. Associated with these 5 senses, we have 5 places in our brain which are called the sensory areas. We have a sensory zone for sight, optic centers they are called. We have the sensory zones for sound, auditory centers. Same for touch, same for taste, and same for smell. If the sensory zones responsible for sight are damaged, we become blind. If the part of the brain responsible for hearing ability is damaged, we just become deaf. This is what every animal has. But that's not what makes our brain complex. What makes our brain complex is each of these 5 senses has what is called as an association area. This association area is something that's magical. If the sensory zone is damaged, we become blind. Assuming that the vision sensory zone is working, but for some strange reason the association area is damaged, you can see everything, but you will not be able to process and understand what you are seeing. Now, when we say the humans have a complex brain, we are talking about the association areas. What are those areas actually? They are the centers of your memory. This memory is also called experience. That's why we are the only species who depend on learned knowledge for our survival. And this complex brain is essentially not only structurally but also functionally complex. This complex brain also implies the B2B ratio, which is the brain to body size ratio. We have too big a brain for a small body like ours. And the last most important aspect of the human biological nature, a long gestation and a prolonged postnatal dependencies. The fetus spends a long time in the womb of the mother, 36 weeks, right? After the child is born, there is a very prolonged dependence on the mother. The story behind this is the brain again. You know, when we were evolving, for some strange reason, I told you, the brain was increasing in size. And suddenly we got into a dilemma. Should this brain develop before birth or after birth? And if the brain is fully developed before birth, mother will never be able to give birth because the baby's head will not pass through the mother's birth canal. You know, in other species, most of the brain is developed before birth itself. That's the reason why in 20 days, 21 days, a bird flies. The pace with which the other species reach sexual maturity is very fast. But the human beings have a problem. The brain is now developing only after birth. This is totally blank when we are born, you know. You know how many days it takes for the brain to fully develop in the human species? That is the one organ that needs to develop quantitatively and qualitatively, physically and functionally, only after we are born. You know how many days it takes or months? Can you guess? It takes 21 years. That is the reason why in almost many nations in the world, the law says that you are not an adult till the time you are 21. That is the reason why our parents never accept us to be adults even at the age of 20. That's the reason why, the societies very reluctantly give you any freedom when you are a minor. You are sexually mature before you are intellectually mature. That's why child marriages were allowed. But you won't get the important positions in the government, in the law and other sectors unless you are 21. That's the time the brain takes. It stabilizes around 21. When the child is developing only in 21 years, don't you think the child is dependent on the parents? That is the reason why in the human species there is an institution called marriage and there is an institution called family. The reason is because the human offspring are not capable of taking care of themselves till the time they are fully grown. So these are, I don't say this is a exhaustive list, but I would say these are the most defining aspects of human biology because these are the ones that have led to the behavioral nature of man, culture and society. We were talking about how a simple fact like the brain and its need to develop after the child is born has led to some kind of a contract between the parents. Infants per se are considered to be very vulnerable, not only in our species but other species too. But the other species have an advantage, they rapidly grow, they rapidly develop. But unfortunately, as far as the human infant is concerned, it has to be monitored 24/7, 365 days. And it has to be nurtured, it has to be protected. And when we are born, how are we born? We are born like any other animal. We are born completely socially blank. We don't have anything, any knowledge, any content, or any kind of an information that helps us improve our chances of survival. It's like a brand new, newly formatted hard disk, and we need to fill it up. And what do we fill it up with? Experience. And that experience is not something that we are born with. Unfortunately, our chromosomes, our DNA don't carry any information that helps us survive socially. They only carry information that keeps us alive biologically. And it takes a long time for us to gather this experience. Whereas in the case of other species, the moment they are born, they know what they are supposed to do. It takes a few days, probably few months for them to start fending for themselves or defending for themselves. Whereas in our case, we are dependent on the parents for a very long period of time. Now here is a male who has begotten the child, who impregnated the woman, and that's where his job ends, biologically speaking, in the reproductive process. But whereas for the woman, she is bound by a very long pregnancy, lasting almost 36 weeks. And even after the child is born, she is bound by the domestic responsibility of taking care of the child. And it was at that period of time we decided that there has to be something like a division of labor. Slowly the institutions of relationships, which probably later on evolved into marriage, family, and everything came into existence. So this biological nature has laid the foundation, or rather has set in motion a chain reaction that has resulted in the evolution of the behavioral nature. When this is the word that we use synonymously with what we call in anthropology as culture. It's a sum total of our way of life. What we have is culture, what we are is culture, what we do is culture, what we don't do is also culture. So we will be elaborating on the concept very comprehensively later on, but as an introduction to anthropology, let us restrict ourselves to the broad aspects of what we normally mean when we say culture. Why don't we compare ourselves behaviorally with the other species and try and come out with a few points that can be identified as the hallmark of human behavior. We all have animal instincts, hunger, thirst, anger, sex. But unlike other animals, we try to bridle them. Just like the way we put a leash on a wild animal, we also put a leash on it. We kind of consciously try to control our animal instincts. So that's what we are capable of. So behaviorally, we are more conscious of our own instincts. We control our instincts, and we are more rational. Man is a rational animal because he weighs the pros and cons of everything he does. We have something that other animals don't have, and that is conscience. And that so-called rational behavior, we always keep asking this question: is this the right way or the wrong way of doing things? So end of the day, all of this we can sum it up by saying that humans have something which other animals don't: morality. Morals are the do's and don'ts, the shoulds and shouldn'ts of our life. And who defines them for us? The society in which we live defines them. What is moral for us could be immoral in one society. What is immoral for us could be moral for them. The most important difference between the human society and animal societies is that we are rule bound. Who made them? We made them. Why did we make them? Because we decided that, unless and until we all live together, we can't satisfy our needs. And unless and until we cooperate and coordinate with each other, we cannot progress and develop. But the only way we can cooperate, the only way we can coordinate, the only way both of us can actually achieve the goals we have set for ourselves is by making sure that we make some common rules and we stick to them. We are cooperating and coordinating and taking the human existence to the next level. How many animals are capable of doing it? So that's the most important difference between the animal society and the human society. Language and speech. A language is a system of communication which has a structure, meaning, and a grammar. We have something called the syntax. That means there is a rule with which you are supposed to construct sounds into words, words into sentences, and sentences into language. There's an order for it. Our language is purely symbolic. See, I'm making some sounds. These sounds have a meaning to you. That is the reason why you are responding to what I am saying. In, let us say, the African tribe, the Bushmen of Kalahari, and speak in this language, do you think they'll understand? No. Human language is symbolic in nature. We use symbolism as a method of communication. What is a symbol? Symbol is anything that stands for something. The number of sounds the humans can make is finite, but the number of meanings we attach to those sounds is infinite. Is there any thought of yours, any emotion of yours that cannot be communicated? There's virtually nothing. Look at the poets and their poetry, the artists and their art, the painters, the sculptors, the architects. We communicate through color, we communicate through sounds, communicate through smell, we communicate through gestures, we communicate through a hell lot of things that are totally inaccessible to the other species. That is what language is, and you'll understand the complexity of the language when we discuss what it means when I come to linguistic anthropology. And speech. Speech is a verbal communication. I'm speaking to you right now. Other animals can make verbal sounds, but there are only a small set of sounds they can make, and the meaning of the sounds will never change. There were some anthropologists who were tempted to name our species Homo loquens, not Homo sapien, because we are the speaking man. And when I say language, I don't just mean speech, I mean also the written script. And there is a whole repertoire, a whole bag full of non-verbal communications also that we use while we are speaking, writing, and everything else. Social organization. This social organization again is not just living together, by the way. We have complex economic networks, we have political institutions like law, customs, etc. And then of course they are also characterized by the division of labor. When I say division of labor, I mean complex divisions of labor, not simple division of labor which is there in other animals also. Male and female do different tasks even in animal societies. But when it comes to the human societies, it's not just the male and the female, but the young and the old. There are divisions of labor based on skills, abilities, talent. So those kind of complex behaviors and dividing a task among many people and all of them sharing the task and finishing it on time is again something only we have. And don't forget, a very important aspect of human culture or behavior is religion. Economic institutions came in order to satisfy our hunger. Political institutions came in order to provide us security. Family, marriage and kinship developed because we had to take care of the childbirth, child grooming and nurturing. Every institution we created in the society has a reason why it exists. This is what we call in anthropology as a functional approach. But why did we create religion? Originally, it evolved to answer man's questions. Then came science. But unfortunately, you see, science doesn't explain everything in our lives. If science can explain everything, we wouldn't have had religion. And religion is symbolic. It requires a very high cognitive abilities to imagine the unimaginable. We have illusions. We have delusions, visual and auditory. That's why it's called the opiate of masses. It's very difficult for us to rationalize with the human mind beyond such marvelous capabilities as reason and emotion. The human brain is a spiritual force that can only be described but never defined. I'm not denying completely that other animals don't have them. Even if they have them, I don't think they exhibit them to the same level of complexity with which they manifest in the human beings. I don't think other animals are capable of these capacities that define what we are. Even if they are present, like language in some other animals, the behavior is rudimentary. These qualities, these behaviors is what we call as culture. There's so many things that we take for granted, in ourselves. But those things that you take for granted have taken millions of years to evolve. It's not easy to have those capacities. Many other species were co-evolving with us. Our very immediate cousins, the chimpanzee, gorilla and the orangutan, don't have the capacities like we have. What keeps us alive is not the biology. What is keeping us alive is our culture. Please remember that. Those inventions, those discoveries, those technologies is what has kept us alive. If we did not have this culture, this technology, those inventions and discoveries, we would have been extinct even before we evolved. Can you survive without the kind of the welfare state that we invented, the public distribution system? Can we survive without those antibiotics? Can we survive without those surgeries and those diagnostic techniques that we are blessed with today? No, we cannot. So you see, what has kept us alive is definitely not our biology. Biology has made us more weaker. But what has kept us alive is our culture. The reason why we took chances with our biology is only because we were confident about our culture. Now you understand, a discipline devoted to a discourse on human nature, such a simple definition, but such a big story behind it. Your job is to translate what the human cultures say and communicate with the rest of the world the stories that every culture is trying to narrate.